I think this is one of the most shocking, but also one of the most under the radar stories that's going on in Canada right now. And I think because it tends to be a little bit complex that mainstream news outlets are tending not to cover this as much as it deserves to be covered. Allegations of interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections by the CCP have been sort of rolling out slowly over the past couple of months, but they recently reached a climax just last Friday night when a new report came from the Globe and Mail, two very heavily respected journalists actually bringing this to the limelight. The report claims that they were able to access some confidential documents from CSIS that outline the funneling of money illegally to certain candidates in those elections in Canada, business owners hiring students to work at their business, but then allowing them to, while they're being paid by the business, go out and volunteer for certain political campaigns, along with MPs actually specifically being paid illegally by these foreign agents. Now, we really got into the nitty-gritty of this on the stream, so let's flip over to that to give you a little bit more context. And I'm going to pop in here and there to provide additional context on things we've learned since this stream was recorded.
Well, I woke up to an explosive report in the Globe and Mail this morning reporting that CSIS documents viewed by the newspaper reveal China's strategy to influence the 2021 election. Beijing wanted the Liberals to be elected, but only to a minority mandate. And according to the documents, China viewed the Conservatives as too harsh on China and used disinformation campaigns against them. Bombshell story today. Tell us broadly what you uncovered here.
What we've uncovered is evidence that the Chinese state, the Chinese government, wanted to affect the outcome of the 2021 election. They wanted the Liberals to win. They did not want the Conservatives to win. They were very unhappy at Conservative policies on China, particularly a bid or a proposal to create a foreign registry, which would keep track of influence. And so
that foreign registry is going to become important here. I can already tell you, based on an interview that I watched a couple of months ago between Kenny Chiu, who is a member of parliament from Vancouver, or should I say former member of parliament after 2021, and what happened to him. He sort of started trying to make a bill to make sure that there wouldn't be as much foreign interference and make a foreign agent registry, much like they have in the States and in other countries. But that was not something that was favorably looked on by certain parties, but I'm sure we'll get to that very soon. This is going to be an important point as well as we get into this, is the difference between an attempt at interfering in an election and actually successfully interfering in an election, whether or not you were actually able to turn the tides and make a different outcome happen from the one that was expected to happen, or the one that would have happened if you hadn't interfered. Trudeau has been along the lines of, hey, yes, there was interference in our elections, but not to the point where it made any difference. It was just sort of some light meddling, and these Globe and Mail reports are saying that, hey, maybe that wasn't exactly the case.
My question for you is, when the government learned of this, why didn't they expel the Chinese government diplomats involved?
I have been saying for years, including on the floor of the House of Commons, that China is trying to interfere in our democracy, in the processes in our country, including during our elections. We are aware of this, and I can assure you that our intelligence and security agencies have been working very hard over the past many years to develop more and more tools to counter this, to make sure that our institutions are kept safe. This is not a new phenomenon. This is something that countries around the world have been grappling with for a long time, and Canada is no exception. But what I think is also really important to say is that for the 2019 and for the 2021 elections, and for elections going forward, this government created a panel of top civil servants who would lean on all the information provided to them by our security agencies like CSIS to ensure that interference by foreign actors does not affect the running or the outcomes of our elections. And I can emphasize once again that Canada has some of the best and most robust elections in the world, and all Canadians can have total confidence that the outcomes of the 2019 and the 2021 elections were determined by Canadians and Canadians alone at the voting booth.
So we're seeing some common themes here about the way the Prime Minister is choosing to respond to these types of questions. Whenever he's asked about this foreign interference, he says, well, we put together a panel that took a look at these elections and they determined that the final outcome of the election was not impacted by whatever interference there was. And this is something that we got into in a lot more depth in the stream, but it became clear as a part of this Globe and Mail report that there were ridings in Canada where a different outcome actually happened as a result of this interference, but not enough ridings to make a difference in terms of what the final result of the election was, in terms of which government is in power and whether or not that government has a majority or a minority. The panel determined that, hey, even if there wasn't this interference, the final outcomes, even if there was a little difference in terms of 3 or 4 seats here and there for different ridings, well, the final outcome remains the same. And this is what Trudeau keeps saying, is that the Canadians determined the outcome of the election, but it's very crafted language here saying, well, even though certain ridings may have actually had like a flip as a result of this, the final outcome was the same. And the question remains is like, what amount of interference is okay and what amount of interference is not okay? Is just the changing of a few votes, is that sufficient enough to want to look into? Or is a flipping of one riding, is that okay? Or at what point do we need to take this extremely seriously? Now, the leader of the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, obviously takes this as an opportunity to call out Trudeau and his handling of the situation. Of course, the Conservatives are going to take any opportunity that they can get to make the Prime Minister look bad in any situation. So Poilievre frames this in a very different way than Trudeau does. Take a look at this.
He claims he never knew anything about it. But is it really believable? Is it really believable that our foreign intel, is it really believable that CSIS would write an entire report and share it with foreign governments without actually telling our own Prime Minister? Is it really believable that the many reports that have been written over the last 4 years about this, that have now come to light in newspapers because they've been leaked by courageous whistleblowers inside our intelligence apparatus, never were brought before the Prime Minister of Canada? Of course that is not believable. Justin Trudeau knew about this interference, and he covered it up because he benefited from it. He is perfectly happy to let a foreign authoritarian government interfere in our elections as long as they're helping him. And according to the Globe and Mail story today, this foreign authoritarian government wanted to see Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister because they knew that he would work for their interests rather than Canada's interest. And that's why he's covered up this.
I'll push back on that comment from Poilievre specifically, saying that they wanted Trudeau to be in power because they would work on the CCP's behalf. Now, I don't know that that's entirely the case, because the report also does say that the CCP wanted a Liberal minority government. They thought that if the Liberals got a majority, that it would be more likely to have change, right? Of course, any majority government is going to result in the ability for that one party to make more change more quickly, because you don't need to work with anybody else. But the report says that they wanted specifically a minority government so that the Liberals and the Conservatives and nobody would be able to change the current policy as easily. Of course, they wanted Liberals over Conservatives, but saying that Trudeau would necessarily do the bidding of them, I think is a little bit of a stretch here. What do you think? Let me know in the chat. So it seems like CSIS gave this report saying, hey, there's this sort of network of interference activity going on, and Trudeau and his staff were given this report, but nobody was notified that this was going on. No one was notified as to who exactly was being targeted and to what extent they were being targeted, and to try to make them not win their seat or not win their riding. Although this is challenging to sort of look at, because there's no before and after numbers that we can compare here, right? We can't see what the results would have been if there were no interference and compare that to the results with interference. So this isn't an exact science in terms of how we can actually measure how much interference actually impacted the outcome of these elections. But before all of this information leaked, before these reports came out from the Globe and Mail, well, we actually had a member of Parliament who felt like this was happening to them give interviews about this happening happening to them, and that candidate is Kenny Chiu in Vancouver. This is someone that it seems like the CCP targeted, saying, hey, we think that you are anti-China in your policies, because this was the member of parliament that was very heavily pushing for a foreign agent registry, like a big list that Canada would have on who is considered a foreign agent and who is sort of acting in Canada in terms of impacting politics, who is also on this registry, something that other countries similar to Canada have, but Canada currently doesn't have. This is Kenny Chiu, who was proposing that, and as a result was targeted and lost his seat. So we've looked at CBC articles, we've looked at Globe and Mail articles, CBC videos, CTV videos, I believe, in this stream. Now we're going to take a look at what was actually posted a year ago by Rebel News. I know a lot of people, it's a very polarizing sort of news source, right? Some people will say that it's extremely right-leaning, and some people on the left will say it's not a credible news source. I think oftentimes it gets the rap that it will sort of start reporting on things before there's clear evidence of those things. Now, as a result of reporting on things quickly, they often get a lot of things right. And this was an interesting interview that I watched back at the time, and I remember feeling very skeptical of the claims here, but now, given what we know, it seems a lot more likely. And this is Kenny Chiu, and he's one of the MPs who is actually targeted here, right? Who was sort of ousted from his seat. And this is an interview that was held an entire year ago about how this happened to him, far before the Globe and Mail article. So I thought that it would be interesting to bring to your attention here.
WeChat, an article or something went up, and it indicated that you yourself were anti-Chinese because of the bill. Help me make some sense of that. I believe you're from Hong Kong, aren't you?
Well, I'm from Hong Kong. I was born in Hong Kong, but I came to Canada at the age of 17, 18. But prior to that, I've been immersed in Chinese literature. My education is in mother tongue Cantonese, Chinese history and all that. So I know a thing or two about the country China, even though I was born in Hong Kong. The bill itself, the irony is that to avoid political attack like that, we've deliberately avoid naming countries in the bill itself. We want to leave it to the experts and the bureaucrats, such as those in CSIS or NCCOP, for them to actually help us fill out which countries this registry act should pass would be applicable to.
So what would you say in particular about the people who did read this article or multiple articles? What was it about them that maybe made them conclude that it was anti-Chinese?
Well, Dre, it's not us. It's not anybody who indicated the foreign influence. In fact, throughout the years, the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, CSIS, and other national security apparatus have actually warned the government of Canada, that Canada is subject to foreign interference, be that from People's Republic of China, but also Russia and Iran, etc., foreign powers.
Now, since information on this started trickling out a couple of months ago, there's already a parliamentary House committee that's sort of studying this and the impact of this interference on the elections. But given all of the new information that just came out in this report last Friday, they said, hey, we need to, the House of Commons is currently on a 2-week break, but they had an emergency meeting saying, hey, we got to come back on Monday or on Tuesday rather, after Family Day, and have a meeting about this, because we need to expand the scope of our study given all of this new information. And that's exactly what they did yesterday on Tuesday. We didn't cover this on the stream, so this is some new information. They came back into this House of Commons committee, and the Conservatives put forward a motion saying, hey, we need to add extra meetings to our schedule here to study exactly what happened. We need to talk to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, as well as the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. And this is the key crucial thing inside of this proposal from the Conservatives, is that we need to see all documents relating to what the government was told and when, without redaction. That's sort of what the Conservatives were putting forward at this meeting. Now, At the end of the day, it ended up being sort of struck down, or that sort of motion was amended with support from the Liberals and the NDP, saying that that is a sort of irresponsible way of going about things in terms of the documents that the Conservatives were trying to get as a result of this motion, saying that it wouldn't be secure for this public committee to be taking a look at these unredacted documents about what CSIS said in their report and the way that they were actually gathering this information about this interference that was going on. Both the NDP and the Liberals agreed that, hey, we got to be careful with our handling of these documents because it could actually inadvertently help more interference in the future if they can see how we're gathering information about the interference that is happening. So everyone in this procedures committee agreed that, yeah, we need to take a closer look at this. We're going to extend our amount of time that we're going to be looking at this. We're going to be holding more meetings, talking to officials, even to officials that we've already talked to in the past. We're going to talk to them about this new information, but we're not going to get unredacted documents. We're going to have the documents that we currently have in their redacted nature, and that's what we're going to be able to use there. Now, given that that is happening, the Liberals also had concerns about the timing around the focus on foreign interference here, claiming that the Conservatives were just using this as a fishing expedition to try to make the Prime Minister look bad, saying that the Conservatives were only caring about foreign interference as of this report, but the Liberals tabled a report in early March 2020 outlining their findings on interference and seeing that it is a widespread problem in Canada. So the Liberals are saying, well, why didn't you start focusing on it back then? Why are you only focusing on it now, given this new report? It seems that the Conservatives are just using this as a way to smear the Prime Minister. That's the Liberals' sort of stance on this, and that the motion is about sort of fishing and digging deeper and deeper and deeper without any sort of bias towards action on actually implementing solutions to stop this from happening as much in the future, saying, hey, your focus is on making the Prime Minister look bad and digging and digging and digging rather than actually trying to find a solution here. The Conservatives responded saying, hey, well, this isn't a fishing expedition. We're trying to get all of the information here, specifically why the individual candidates who were being targeted negatively by this foreign interference, why they weren't notified of this, even though the Prime Minister knew that this was happening during the election. That's what their big issue with this is, that they need to dig deeper to find out why weren't these MPs notified that this was going on, even though the Liberal government had this information at the time of the election. And in this meeting, the NDP said, yeah, we actually agree with you Conservatives. We need to take a closer look at this. We need to have more meetings. We need to talk to more people, but we don't agree with your method for looking at these documents. We don't think that these unredacted documents should be out. It's an irresponsible approach to national security. We will support your motion to study this in more depth, but we have to amend it to make sure that there isn't sensitive information that's leaking out to other countries as to how Canada operates its national security. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens with all of this in all of these meetings and all of the sort of new things that are brought up, and if the media is able to find anything else that we didn't previously know. It's likely that the Prime Minister is going to stick to saying, hey, I never denied that there was election interference. We know there's election interference, but the elections were not ultimately decided by this interference. This is the language that he's consistently been using, and likely the position that the Liberals are going to take over the long term here as we dig deeper and deeper. I'm curious what you think about all this, though. I know this is a sensitive topic for many, and sometimes these videos can do less well on this channel, I'm finding, in terms of this topic, but I think it's important enough to continue sort of talking about it, because I think it's kind of flying under the radar as a major story in Canada. Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you next time.